The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local journalism today at chly.ca/donate. Local news doesn't survive without local support.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Jesse Woodward, filling in for Joe Pugh, who's on vacation. On July 7th, the City of Nanaimo moved forward on a long-standing need for recreational and gathering space in the south end of the city, with the purchase of land in Chase River for a South End Community Center. Today, Mayor Leonard Krog speaks with me about the purchase and the project. Also on July 7th, Council finally adopted its amended off-street parking regulations bylaw after 3 previous readings of the amendment. This decision removes off-street parking minimums in part of downtown Nanaimo, referred to as the Downtown Urban Center. Michael Basilli of Strong Towns Nanaimo joins me to discuss that decision and their thoughts regarding parking reforms in Nanaimo. But first, my conversation with Mayor Krog. So, for the listener not familiar, can you put a pin on their mental map of where the city purchased land for the South End Community Center?
It will be located south of 10th Street, next to the existing seniors facility behind Southgate Mall. So fairly easy to find. Come up Junction Avenue and you'll be there. And
so what was the cost of the acquisition?
Overall, it's a $5.3 million budget to acquire the properties, and that includes a $2.5 million contribution from the province of British Columbia's Growing Communities Fund. So relatively speaking, a bargain from my perspective as a municipal politician, having regard to the price of land, and fulfills a long-standing commitment, if you will, from various politicians over the last couple of decades who've identified the need as really important, and indeed one of the City Council's top 3 priorities was a community centre in the South End.
Right, and so I've read through some of the documentation that there's also been some costs for acquiring parking.
Yes, $1.25 million in order to substitute for the parking that's going to disappear. And obviously we'll need parking over time for the facility itself, notwithstanding the building of many bike lanes and providing amenities in that regard. People in Nanaimo are still traveling by vehicle.
Yeah, I think I saw that 10% of the potential plot might be reserved for parking for vehicles. So can you describe the scope of the South End Community Center? Will it differ from Oliver Woods in the north end of Nanaimo?
Similar to Oliver Woods. What we're envisioning is basically a central hub that'll serve growing needs from community services for recreation, education, wellness activities. The study that we had done revealed the need for a gymnasium, for childcare facilities, multipurpose rooms, amongst other recreational needs. So it has potential for that library, primary healthcare services, possibly community safety and performing arts spaces. We're not settled on a design yet. And indeed, the discussion is around size, whether we'll go for a slightly larger option as opposed to a smaller option potentially. So something between 53,000 and 67,000 square feet, which sounds like a big number. Until you actually figure out the needs of the community, which are substantial. We're one of the 5 fastest growing regions in the country, as I remind everybody, and that places incredible demand on our facilities. There'll no doubt be a place for people to play pickleball.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I enjoy pickleball myself, so...
Pickleball is like COVID. It hit the city hard, and everyone wants to play pickleball.
Yeah. So it's been described as both potentially a 1-story building as well as a 2-story building, depending on the level of services needing to be delivered. Some of those potential services mentioned were potentially a new location for a library, but also emergency services for unhoused people. What could that particularly entail in terms of unhoused people?
I think in terms of emergency service for unhoused people, it wouldn't be any different than we do now in a genuine emergency when the province requires the city to provide shelter spaces, and they are shelter spaces, emergency services, during extreme heat.
Heat dome like we had back 3 or 4 years ago now?
Yes, or extreme cold.
Yeah.
It's not as if you're going to have a permanent shelter facility that operates 24/7, 365 a year. It would be during emergency situations. And that, those kind of programs exist now. Any community public facility would be available in a genuine emergency situation like that.
Okay. So in 2008, when Oliver Woods was completed, it apparently cost approximately $12.8 million to complete. With inflation, today that's approximately $18.35 million in 2025. What's the estimated cost of this project today?
I'm not going to offer an estimate, not because I'm being evasive, but simply because, as we all know, construction costs have risen dramatically in the last few years. To suggest that the consumer price index for inflation is a way to measure the difference between the cost of an Oliver Woods and the cost of a South End community facility, which would be equivalent, is just not fair. As I remind everybody, we don't buy a lot of groceries at City Hall, but we buy a lot of steel and concrete, and I can tell you what the market prices for those things are enormous. As I think I may have said on CHLY before, and I've certainly stated publicly, when we replaced the water lines under Bowen Road and doubled capacity, those big pipes were $500 a foot, not a meter, a foot, not installed. $55 million got buried in the ground, and most citizens in Nanaimo wouldn't know it exists, except for the fact the hospital nearly ran out of water when the line on Bowen Road blew. So I can assure you, we are talking tens of millions of dollars. We're not talking anything in the range of an Oliver Woods. It points out why, and this is a frustrating part of this for me, and I'll bring up Public Works as an example. If we had built the Public Works yard, which should have been done and could have been done 20 years ago, it would have been minuscule in comparison to the potential cost of it now. The same with the South End Community Association. But, you know, the political will, the willingness of ratepayers, the leadership necessary, it's not always easy to find that together. And sometimes you find yourselves in a situation where you're stuck having to do it at a time that's not perfect. I must say, though, that and this is a terrible thing to say in one respect, in that it means the economy is slowing down. But if the economy does slow down, one would hope we would see a bit of a break on construction costs when this facility is actually started.
So you've mentioned the South End Community Centre has been on the city's priorities list for, well, it's at least been within their thinking for a decade, but it's been more on their priority list for the last few years. At this time last year, there was a decision at council to go to AAP in 2025 regarding funding the project. Given the outcome of other recent AAPs, is this still the plan for council, or are there other options for financing?
As some of your listeners may know, the province has recently announced changes around borrowing for municipal governments, which may well have an impact on how we proceed in terms of funding this. This is clearly a situation where it's not like we have a piggy bank filled with tens of millions of dollars that we can dip into and pay for the project. It would require borrowing. Whether that borrowing will require voter approval and whether that voter approval would be secured with a referendum or an AAP process is a question that's very much up in the air at this stage.
Right. If it does go to AAP or a referendum, how do you convince people who don't live in the South End to support the project, though?
Well, I mean, firstly, I do like to appeal to the better angels of our nature, as Obama would say. The reality is the North End has Oliver Woods. The central part of the community has Bowen and Beban. The South End doesn't have this kind of facility. We have enormous population growth there. With the development of sandstone over time, we're going to see significant growth in the South End. It's one of the few spots in the community where we have reasonably large undeveloped tracts of land. And as I remind everybody concerned about growth and urban sprawl, my view that I bring to my position as a director in the regional district and as mayor of this city is I'd rather us be going up than out. And if we're going out into the regional district and consuming rural properties that now may be treed and or used for agricultural production or supportive agricultural production or provide the kind of green space that most of us want. So having said that, I think it's important that we do this. And it's important because people need it and want it. And I suspect if it goes to a referendum, that people will be relatively positive because they have been waiting for it for a long time. And just because you live in the North End doesn't mean you can't come to the South End to use the recreational facility. Just as people from the South End, travel right now to Oliver Woods or to Costco, depending on what they're looking for.
Right. What might you say to naysayers who might balk at the costs when those numbers become more clear, and those who may be concerned about traffic from growth?
I would say, and having regard to the percentage of home ownership in this community, ask yourself, my friends, that first house you bought, that first condominium, that first piece of land, that first manufactured home, whatever, What did you pay for it, and didn't it seem like a really big and awful and scary number? And 10 and 20 and 30 years down the road, aren't you really, really glad that you did it? That's the reality. We either build now for what is needed and be prepared to pay for it, or we do it when we're desperate down the road and we pay a lot more. Borrowing amortizes the cost of facilities like this over time. There's never a perfect time. And as I say, if the economy does slow down, the capital expenditure involved in this will be welcome in the community, will provide employment, and every dollar we spend in Nanaimo helps Nanaimo.
With that all being said, when might the project break ground and see completion by? Best case scenario, worst case scenario?
We'll be looking, I'm pulling this out of the air really in some respects, a year or two easily. We're going out to the community to talk about what they want to see exactly. We're consulting with partners and groups now who are interested, whether it's school district or whoever, for the kind of facilities that they would like to see there, that they would make use of. We're then looking at, design and just the basic size, as I indicated earlier in the interview. There's a difference between 53,000 square feet and 67,000 square feet. That's roughly a quarter larger. I must admit, I lean towards a larger facility because I think it's going to be needed in time, and also potentially a 2-story facility because it's a better use of land.
Yeah, Chase River has definitely expanded over the years with the Cinnabar Valley developments and all that, as well as Sandstone, as you mentioned. Is there anything finally you would like to add?
I hope that if this does go to an AAP process or a referendum, that the citizens of Nanaimo will think not just of themselves, although they need the facility now, but think of their children and grandchildren. This kind of facility is important. It provides a center for the community. It provides recreation that keeps young people out of trouble, that promotes good health amongst others in the community. And it provides an opportunity for the delivery of services that most of us want.
Yeah, might even keep those seniors out of trouble as well.
We do have a few seniors who create trouble in Nanaimo.
Well, thank you for coming in, Mayor.
A pleasure, as always. Thank you.
Leonard Krog is Mayor for the City of Nanaimo. Our newsroom will follow the South End Community Center project as it develops.
Midcoast Morning is part of our nonprofit newsroom project, supported by listeners like you. Keep this program on the air by funding it today with a monthly sustaining donation at chly.ca/donate. We've got tote bags and shirts if you need an incentive.
With development often comes parking, usually parking minimums due to parking mandates from municipalities. But a recent amendment to the City of Nanaimo's off-street parking regulation has changed that for a portion of downtown Nanaimo. I speak with a local urban advocate regarding the matter.
Hi, my name is Michael Basilli. I'm the managing director and co-founder of a little group called Strong Towns Nanaimo. We're a nonprofit group in Nanaimo, focusing on advocating for a city built for people, not cars.
Okay, and so we interviewed Strong Towns last year in September about parking minimums, having interviewed Kaylin Middleton about peering before council at that time. Can you maybe bring us up to speed on what's happened since then?
Absolutely, yeah. So since last year, we wrote a white paper on the harms of mandatory parking mandates in the context of the City of Nanaimo. It was about 30 pages, available on our website if you go to beautifulnanaimo.ca/parking. Essentially, in that policy document, we outlined a couple of policy recommendations, the largest of which was a recommendation of full elimination across the entirety of Nanaimo. Since then, we've been working closely with the City of Nanaimo staff and council to iron out a path forward for some sort of reform in the city. This coincided with some of the work the city was already doing with their own consultant, sort of reimagining their parking mandate situation right now across the city. The first phase of this reform was essentially a recommendation for full elimination of mandatory parking mandates in the downtown primary urban center of the City of Nanaimo. And I'm happy to report that on Monday, June 7th, at the 7 p.m. regular council meeting, council voted near unanimously to eliminate mandatory parking mandates in the City of Nanaimo's downtown.
As far as like the downtown concerned, does that include areas like Nickel Street, or is it more of like a even more specifically downtown area?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the map is available online if you look it up, but essentially what it boils down to is the entirety of Commercial Street, Front Street, through the Terminal Trench, up the hill a little bit, up sort of the Old City Quarter. It does not extend too much further down Nickel. It kind of excludes the Nob Hill region as well. It's mainly comprising the sort of downtown transit-oriented core. If you think of our downtown as like the Island Highway as the sort of middle spine, then you have the section touching the water. That's all excluded now, and then a little bit up the hill.
Okay, so can you maybe explain for the listener what a parking minimum, alternatively a parking mandate is?
Absolutely. So essentially what it comes down to is this. When you go to build a commercial development or residential development, the city mandates mandatory amounts of parking stalls for your development. This varies depending on how large your development is, how many bedrooms, for instance, on a residential building, how many tables are at your coffee shop, those sorts of situations. What it boils down to is if I wanted to build, let's say, a duplex with a unit on both sides with 2 bedrooms, the city would say, oh, you would need to provide between 4 and 6 parking stalls, for instance, depending on where in the city you are. A lot of times, though, what ends up happening is there's a cost issue and there's a space issue for parking. Cost issue is pretty self-explanatory. If you were to build 1 parking stall underground, the sort of going average right now is about $100,000 per stall underground. So you can imagine if you're building a modest apartment building with an underground parkade, costs just to park and store vehicles will skyrocket, even if that development is, say, right downtown, right next to a transit station. The second, of course, is space. If, say, someone owns an old heritage home in Harewood, for instance, and they want to turn it into a duplex, a triplex, they want to take advantage of the province's new missing middle housing reform that allows them to build multiple units on a single family lot. They want to build some more housing. They might not be able to fit in the parking stalls required on the sort of single family lot in Harewood. There just isn't enough space for it above ground, and to put it underground, like I said, it would cost a lot of money. So those developments essentially disappear. They're never actually built, and there's this sort of latent demand for housing that just never gets to materialize.
Right. And so when we're talking about parking minimums, parking mandates, we're talking about like on-site parking, not like on-street parking.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're called off-street parking mandates, essentially.
Okay. So you kind of got into it. But for example, a lot of downtown was built pre-parking mandate, especially in like the core of the downtown. And so, for example, buildings like the Vault Cafe, how did the previous parking mandate impact a building like that, say in the case of a disaster and the need to rebuild?
Great question. So I think a lot of people don't understand that most of our downtown, like you said, was built before parking mandates were a thing. If an earthquake were to level our downtown, we could not rebuild the way we are right now. We could not build the Vault Cafe because the Vault Cafe has no off-street parking. On Newcastle Avenue, sort of right off of the seawall downtown, most of those residential buildings also are not compliant with mandatory parking mandates that are in place right now, or at least they were before the 7th. So if they, again, were to be leveled, if we want to rebuild, we would have to get variances for each one of those buildings. We'd have to essentially appeal council for each development to eliminate parking mandates. So it becomes very challenging when you see an empty lot downtown and you ask, oh, well, why can't we build? Like, why is there no development here? Why is there no condo or apartment building, maybe some commercial? A lot of it comes down to, first of all, land cost is a lot higher downtown. It's a very desirable location to be right next to the water. But to make those developments pencil out, you would need essentially a reduction in parking stalls or elimination, depending on where you are. And that just doesn't pencil out for a lot of developers. So we've seen time and time again over the years these proposed developments downtown that have never materialized. And that's a economic argument, of course, but there's also there's the human scale argument. A space that's built for vehicles is vastly different. It feels a lot different than a place that is not built for vehicles. If you walk down Commercial Street today, you can tell this place is purposely designed to be a space for humans, for people in the city to walk around, to do business. Contrast that with like Woodgrove, for instance, a place that was built, far after parking mandates were sort of established in the City of Nanaimo. And as a result, we had to build a lot of parking to meet our apartment buildings and our commercial spaces in the north end. So you get these large swaths of concrete. It's very unpleasant to be in. It's dangerous. So that's sort of what we want to avoid. If we don't want downtown Nanaimo to look like Woodgrove should an earthquake come and flatten the city, of course. But we also want to think ahead, like when we go to develop new residential buildings, new commercial spaces, not just in downtown, but the rest of town. We want those places to be vibrant and economically resilient, and we want them to be spaces where people want to spend time in.
So in your view, do you think it's possible for businesses to be successful without on-site parking?
Absolutely. If you come downtown every Thursday in the summer, I think it's a testament to how much people of Nanaimo want a space where you can't park directly in front of your establishment. Downtown Nanaimo's Commercial Street Night Market is packed every Thursday. It is a thriving commercial space. There's food, there's entertainment, there's shops. All these places exist and are flourishing without direct access to parking in front of that space. I think it's a common misconception for the last 30 years that if you can't park right in front of an establishment, it's going to suffer economically. It's not going to do very well. People are going to be able to get there. But of course, that excludes all the people who, first of all, can't drive or aren't able to drive or don't want to drive. It also excludes the people who live in these communities, live downtown, live in the old city. But you brought up the Vault Cafe earlier. Again, the Vault Cafe has no parking off street. So to get to the Vault Cafe, you need to figure it out. You need to maybe park a little far away, take the bus, walk, ride your bike. But the Vault Cafe has not suffered from a lack of parking. If anything, it has thrived. The indoor space is so much larger. There's so much more commercial space that could be occupied by people instead of storing vehicles. And that's allowed a place like the Vault Cafe to become this sort of hub downtown. And, I think of all the places that could become similar community hubs, community spaces, if we were to decouple parking from these establishments. I think I want to challenge a lot of people to look at their favorite places, not just downtown, but in Victoria, Vancouver, other cities that operate just fine without sort of direct access to with vehicles. And on top of that, a lot of people seem to equate seeing a vehicle parked inside of a building and thinking, oh yeah, that means the place is packed. But in reality, a single occupancy vehicle only really carries 1 to 2 people on average, if you look at the metrics from almost any municipality in British Columbia. So what it comes down to is, do you want to essentially cater to 1 or 2 people per parking stall, again, which costs about $100,000 if you were to build it in a parkade, or do you want to replace that space with maybe more commercial space, maybe cheaper rents, cheaper development costs for residential spaces? I think if you were to look at a place like downtown Victoria, for instance, around Government Street, the amount of people who are walking and riding their bike and taking transit in that area, you can just fit a lot more people. You can fit a lot more customers, residents in these areas without having to force them to compete for a handful of parking spaces.
So switching gears a little bit from downtown, but to another urban node, as I think the City of Nanaimo is describing it, Chase River area. The City of Nanaimo has purchased land for the South End Community Center, which has been planned for many years for about $5.1 million. In your opinion, what does a facility like this need to succeed?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And we're really excited to see the community center sort of move and progress. The South End has been historically deprived of the sorts of larger community spaces that the North End has had for years. And so, in our eyes, and honestly, in the residents' eyes, I think a public gathering space. I mean, the city has a large list of potential uses, but they mentioned cafe, gym, meeting rooms, those sorts of situations, childcare potentially, integrating a mix of commercial potentially into a more community center space. But honestly, anything would be better than what is currently there, which is nothing. The South End residents don't really have that sort of gathering space to meet their neighbors and spend time. It's sort of been lacking historically. And I think this is a really good first step. I will say the one thing I noticed from the procurement of that space is that the city, they received about $2.5 million from the province in terms of funding. $1.25 million was used to pay for the space for the parking facility. So just to contextualize that, about half of the grant, half the money that the city received from the province to build this facility is going to be used to store vehicles, essentially, and not going into building up this beautiful space that the city really needs. Yeah,
kind of reinforcing the idea that there's no such thing as free parking.
Absolutely.
So what's next for Strong Towns? You've had this victory changing this at least bylaw in the context of the downtown area. What are you looking forward to?
It's a great question. So we're still on high gear. The next step is we're still working with the city on future phases. So in the upcoming GPC, the Governance and Priorities Council meeting coming up in July here, staff's going to be approaching the council with a few more essentially recommendations for further parking mandate eliminations. And most of the recommendations were essentially mimicking what we already had in our policy document, which was very refreshing. The first was a full elimination of mandatory parking mandates in all secondary urban nodes as well. So think VIU, Woodgrove, all the transit-oriented areas. If you were to open up the official community plan for the City of Nanaimo, all of their urban nodes, that should be a no-brainer to eliminate parking mandates there. They're already well served with transit. They're a lot denser. That's where the commercial and business spaces of our other nodes are. But the second is a decrease, and frankly, we wanted a full elimination on these corridors, but the City of Nanaimo staff is recommending a decrease in mandatory parking mandates along bus rapid transit and frequent transit corridors. And again, if you were to open up the transit map of Nanaimo, what the BRT corridor and the transit corridors of town are essentially the spine on Island Highway. You have Uplands as well. You have Wakasaya, all of these like rapid transit nodes. That comprises a good chunk of the city of Nanaimo. And again, it's not perfect. I mean, we're quite ambitious with our initial recommendation of full parking mandate elimination, and we'll always push for that. But working with the city on this incremental approach, we really want to make sure that they get it right. We want to make sure that the next phase after downtown is this broader sort of parking mandate elimination along all transit accessible areas, all areas that are well served with commercial and residential spaces in our town that really thrive as urban nodes. Because at the end of the day, we want to build destinations, not sort of pass through places.
And is there anything else you think folks should know, or?
Yeah, the last thing I want to say, I guess, is if you're interested in learning more about mandatory parking mandates, we do have our website again, beautifulnanaimo.ca/parking, where you can not only read our policy document, but also letters of support from organizations and people such as like Donald Shoup, sort of the grandfather of parking reform. And you can also attend a Strong Towns meeting. We meet once a month, usually on the second Saturday of the month. We do walking tours. We meet at the library. We kind of do bike rides around town, surveys, sorts of things like that. Really just get engaged with not just our group, but other organizations around town that are trying to push for change. The Nanaimo Cycling Coalition is a new one as well. Really get out there and ask yourself, how can we improve our city? How can we make Nanaimo a better, more beautiful place, more resilient place? And ask questions when you sort of walk around town. Why does Woodgrove look the way it does? Why are there so many empty lots downtown? Why do I have to go appeal the city if I want to build a duplex and I want to have maybe 2 parking spots instead of 4? Ask some questions here, engage with your community, because that's really how change happens.
Michael Basilli is co-founder of Strong Towns Nanaimo, and that's our show for today. I'm Jesse Woodward, executive producer for Midcoast Morning, filling in for Joe Pugh. RB Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe. If you have a story you think we should cover, email us at news@chly.ca. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. Find them on Bandcamp. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another edition of Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and generous listeners like you. Support our news, current affairs, and arts and cultural programming through our nonprofit newsroom project today by making a monthly sustaining donation at chly.ca/donate. Finally, this program gives thanks to the Snuneymuxw First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.